If you can't stay consistent on track and continue to make mistakes, watch this video. I'm a real-life racing driver and former sim racing world champion with hundreds of hours of driver development experience, so here are the secrets that most people will not tell you. In this video, we need to talk about how mental aspects affect your ability to be fast lap after lap. What I usually tell drivers is that they need to understand that the human brain is essentially a piece of software that runs almost entirely off of a preset compilation of programs that we learn throughout the years. Think about it from this perspective. An app on your phone needs many blocks of code to run effectively without failure. If it's missing a piece of code, the app will not be able to function correctly for the user. For example, when you're getting in the sim or a real car, you don't have to mentally think about how to move your leg to get into the seat, position your body, what pedal does what, etc., because these actions or reactions are already pre-programmed into your subconscious toolbox, we'll call it. This becomes important because it means that almost everything we do when racing is a result of what we have stored in our minds, and most of our mistakes come from things in which we don't have a pre-planned program for. It might sound ridiculous, but in high performance cars, we want to be as similar to a robot as possible. If we look at someone like Verstappen, when's the last time you can really remember him making a driving error? I bet you can't think of very many. This comes down to the fact that he's had years of experience which allowed him to develop many high-level processes, and anytime a situation comes up, for example, oversteer on exit of a slow speed corner due to the track falling off, he already has a set of actions ready to use in reaction. Now you may be asking yourself, how can you apply these concepts to your own technique? The most effective way to do this is to become better at your vision. It may sound overly simple, but let me explain. In real life racing, vision is one of the 4 senses we use to drive quickly, but in the sim it's more important because we miss out on things like G-forces and so on, which aren't as easily replicated, if at all. By improving vision, we become able to set accurate reference points, all while being better prepared for what's coming. A lot of drivers end up making mistakes because their reference points are simply just not accurate enough. I often see people saying they're braking between the 1 and the 2 or the 2 and the 3 board, but this simply leaves too much room for error. Instead, we can be more precise by using things like the beginning of a curb, trees, certain bend in the wall, etc. But please avoid using shadows on track, as these will move with the sun. If we think about it for a minute, once you have precise markers and multiple spots for all corners, you will exit the same, have the same entry speed going into the next corner, meaning you can brake at the same spot, giving you the exact same minimum speed, which you can repeat throughout the lap. Does this sound familiar to a robot? This is what you guys need to start doing. If you have these references, it promotes consistent speeds going into the following corners, leaving a lot of margin for error behind. Another one of the many benefits of having pinpoint accurate references is the ability to precisely adjust your input. What I mean by this is, let's say you're running an endurance race and your tires become worn throughout the stint. If you have set references in your practice sessions, it allows for you as a driver to adjust your initial brake input on this reference. Furthermore, if you want to try something new mid-corner, for example, you will now know how that adjustment affected the car because there will be no variables with the braking reference because of how accurate they are. While I do understand there are some chances for slight mistakes when braking or lapses in concentration, this significantly reduces the chance of becoming inconsistent, as it removes a lot of the guesswork out of the equation. Sometimes corners don't have any obvious references. In cases like this, I usually ask drivers if there's anything in or on the car that they're driving that they can use as a reference by lining it up with the landscape. As an example, with the F3 at Road Atlanta, I use the antenna on the front bodywork of the car by lining it up with the trees to let me know when I need to turn in for turns 2 and 3. And keep this in mind, this only works if you're entering the corner at the exact same position as previous laps, which is accomplished by following the first few steps in this video. With this method, I also recommend ensuring that your driver vision settings are set to be as static as possible so the landscape stays even and consistent every lap. Now, after all this, it's still possible that you can make small mistakes that require micro corrections in the wheel or pedals. This is where our natural programming comes into play, as we need to ensure we have responses to certain situations that the car is in, which will allow us to get back to where we need to be in relation to our reference points, keeping things consistent over the rest of the lap or stint. You need to make sure that you understand what you need to do if you end up in an unwanted position. How can this be done? Having a good understanding of how to manipulate the characteristics of the car and the grip limit. These two go hand in hand. Let's talk about it. To adjust how a car handles, you need to first know how you can force the car to rotate and vice versa to stop rotating. In racing, we have things at our disposal that give us the ability to rotate a car, but the 3 most effective ones are trail brake, braking, engine braking, and steering. Notice how I didn't mention the throttle. Can the throttle sometimes rotate the car? Maybe. Is it an effective way? No. Why? Because if you're using the throttle to rotate the rear of the car in order to point the front, it typically means you're searching for rotation far too late in the corner, which is killing your exit speed, likely abusing the rear tires, and much more. With these three main sources that we talked about, we can start practicing how to induce oversteer or understeer. For example, if you have a very understeer prone car or setup, you can use more engine braking by downshifting faster and trail braking more. If you have a very unstable car, it could be the other way around. One thing to keep in mind is that the steering does not always lead to more rotation. In fact, overdoing it can lead to understeer, as the front tires only have a certain amount of grip before they start sliding across the track, overheating the surface, and leading to even less bite in the next corner. The way you should be thinking about it is, the steering is mostly pointing the car into the corner, while the brake pedal and downshifts are equally promoting the car to turn in. With this out of the way, let's talk about the limit. The mistake most drivers make when experimenting in practice or pushing hard in a race is that they go way over the limit and end up crashing, not knowing what the actual cause was. The way to solve this is to experiment with only going 1% over the limit, for example, catching a very minor slide or correcting a very minor amount of understeer, rather than going 30% over the limit and either spinning off track into the barriers or understeering into the grass. A lot of this comes back to the first points brought up in this video. Having set reference points so there's no variables that way, knowing exactly what inputs you can use to promote more or less rotation, and if you get into a slide or understeer, how you can correct it back to a neutral car balance and get on the optimal line for the following corners. For example, if you're trying to get more rotation out of the car in a specific corner, and after trying some new techniques you're now getting snap oversteer, for the next lap you can try inducing less rotation by delaying your last downshift. Having these set programs to know how you can manipulate a car is how you can quickly and consistently get up to speed with less practice.